This bar might look like chaos, but it's not what you think. The broken glass, the alien blood on the floor, the sharp crack of fists and bones. It all stops the moment Kevin Murphy speaks. One calm voice, one rule, and every criminal in the room remembers why Murphy's last drop is the safest place in the station. No fighting in the bar. Outside, you can kill each other for credits or pride. Inside, peace reigns. Because everyone knows the bartender is more dangerous than all of them combined. This place is a fragile kind of heaven in a galaxy that's forgotten mercy. On Grimhold Station, every corridor hides predators. Every favor costs a life. But Kevin's bar stands like a heartbeat of order in the noise. If the rule ever breaks, if someone forgets what peace means here, the whole illusion falls apart. Chaos would pour through the doors, and the people who depend on this place to survive would have nowhere left to run. For two Velvari sisters, that peace is everything. The older one, Thea, hasn't eaten in 4 days. The younger, Astrid, still believes kindness can be traded for food. They've lost their family, their home, and almost their hope. In a world ruled by men like Victor Draven, a man who kills for pleasure and calls it business, children like them don't last long. So Astrid makes a desperate choice. She'll sell herself to save her sister. One deal to keep Thea alive, and that's where peace and violence meet. One man polishing a glass behind a counter, one starving child on the edge of a terrible bargain. In a galaxy built on cruelty, the question isn't who's strong enough to survive, it's who's brave enough to keep their code. Because when the rules fall, monsters like Draven win, and innocence burns with the stars. Kevin Murphy kept his promise of peace, but peace on Grimhold Station always came at a price. He wasn't born a saint, just a man who'd seen too much blood and decided to stop adding to it. Behind his quiet eyes was a history of violence, the kind that left whole syndicates shaking. But none of that mattered here. Inside Murphy's last drop, he wasn't a warlord or a legend. He was a bartender, a man who cleaned up messes, served drinks, and kept monsters in line with nothing more than a calm voice and the weight of his stare. Down below, where the station lights flickered and air recyclers rattled like dying lungs, Thea and Astrid were running out of time. 4 days since their last real meal. Their father's empire had burned, their people scattered, and their names cursed in every database. The younger sister, Astrid, still believed that someone might help them, that kindness existed. Thea knew better. Kindness was a story for people who still had homes. When Astrid heard rumors of a human bar owner who never let anyone die inside his walls, she thought it was fate. Humans had food. Humans had machines that could feed whole cities. And so, with shaking hands and an empty stomach, she decided she'd trade herself. Her life, her freedom, for a meal that might save her sister. Murphy's was loud that night. Scars, gangsters, killers, and mercenaries filling every seat. The door creaked open, and in walked an 8-year-old girl with silver hair and violet eyes bold as a gunshot. The room fell silent. Even the music stopped. "I want to sell myself," she said. "My sister's dying. Somebody has to buy me." The crowd stared. Then came a low laugh from the bar. Kevin set down his glass and said, "Kid, we don't do slavery here. Also, I'm not fat, I'm just big-framed." That simple line broke the tension, but what followed would change everything. Because when Astrid's sister collapsed moments later, Kevin moved faster than anyone could track. 1 second he was behind the counter. The next, he was catching Thea before she hit the floor, his voice calm, his actions sharp and sure. No weapons, no hesitation. Just a man who knew exactly what to do and didn't stop until she was breathing again. The legend of Murphy's last drop wasn't about the drinks. It was about the rule. In a world where strength meant cruelty, Kevin's rule meant safety. If that rule ever broke, if people stopped believing that this tiny piece of the galaxy could stay clean, then nothing good would survive. But as long as Kevin stood behind that bar, polishing his glass and keeping his word, Grimhold Station still had one place where monsters behaved. Thea woke up in a small upstairs room that smelled faintly of soap and steel. For a moment, she thought she was back home, in the silk-lined rooms of her family estate on Silkfall Prime. Then she saw the cracked ceiling, the hum of the station's old lights, and the large human sitting nearby, arms crossed, eyes watching. Kevin Murphy. He didn't speak at first. He just waited while she blinked the fog from her mind. When she finally asked where her sister was, his answer was simple. She's fine, downstairs. Ate half my candy stash already. He stood, his broad shoulders blocking half the light from the door. You're lucky the kid found me instead of someone worse. Thea wanted to argue, to tell him they didn't need his help, but her voice cracked. Pride didn't fill empty stomachs. Kevin handed her a warm drink that smelled of almonds. Protein mix, he said. Custom balanced for your kind. When she asked how he knew about Velvari biology, he shrugged. I read, and I've lived long enough to see a lot of people starve. Downstairs, Astrid was perched on a stool, chattering at the bar's regulars, as if she'd lived there her whole life. The assassin in the corner even cracked a smile, something nobody thought possible. Kevin poured her a glass of juice, and she grinned like it was treasure. For the first time in days, both sisters were alive, safe and full, but peace on Grimhold Station never lasted long. The door opened, and Victor Draven walked in. Slick suit, cold smile, eyes that looked at people like they were property. He owned most of the security force, half the smuggling docks, and too many politicians to count. When he spoke, everyone else went quiet. Murphy, he said, sliding into a chair as if he owned the place. Pour me something good. Kevin's hands didn't shake as he poured. You know the rule, he said, his tone even. No trouble in my bar. Draven's smile widened. Trouble? Never. I just wanted to see your new staff. His eyes lingered on Thea and then on Astrid. Charming? The room went colder. Kevin's hand reached out and caught Draven's wrist before it could touch the girl's arm. No touching the staff, he said softly. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Draven pulled back, his smirk tightening. You forget who owns this level, Murphy. Kevin met his gaze. You forget who owns this bar. The standoff ended with silence. But everyone in the room felt it. The air, the danger, the promise that the next time Draven crossed that line, the man behind the bar wouldn't stay peaceful. When Draven left, Kevin's jaw was tight. He returned to polishing a glass, pretending to be calm. But in his eyes, something had shifted. The rule had been tested. The peace was cracking, and everyone knew it was only a matter of time before Murphy's last drop became the battlefield he'd been avoiding for years. That night, the lights on Grimhold Station flickered like dying stars. Kevin stood alone behind the bar, the same glass in his hand, the same quiet rhythm as always. But his thoughts weren't calm anymore. Draven had looked at Thea the way predators look at prey, and Kevin had seen that kind of hunger before. It was the look that always came before a war. 3 levels below, Thea and Astrid were in the small apartment Kevin had given them. Thea sat awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to her sisters even breathing. She should have felt safe. She didn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Draven's smile. The man who'd destroyed her family, the man who'd burned their home, was still alive, and he was here. The next morning, Draven's men came to the bar. One of them was a Drillaxian with scars across his throat. He didn't order a drink. He ordered fear. Mr. Draven sends his regards, the alien rasped. He placed a small hollow projector on the counter. It flickered to life, showing 2 graves, fresh flowers laid on them, purple Velvari roses. He visits them often, the lieutenant said. Pays his respects. Such a tragedy. All those accidents that happen on stations like this, especially to children. His eyes slid toward Astrid, who had been helping wipe tables. She froze. The crack of breaking glass cut the silence. Kevin's hand was bleeding, his fist closed around what used to be a tumbler. The lieutenant smirked and left, his message delivered. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Kevin said, quietly but clearly, everyone out. The regulars didn't argue. They knew that tone. Within a minute, the bar was empty. Thea and Astrid stood near the counter, wide-eyed. He threatened her, Thea whispered. Yes, Kevin said. His voice was calm again, but too calm. In my bar, what are you going to do? She asked. He looked up, and she saw it, the flicker of the man he used to be. What I should have done the moment he walked in. Kevin moved to the back wall and pulled open a hidden panel. Behind it, row after row of weapons gleamed under the dim light. Pistols, blades, old syndicate tech. He checked each one with mechanical focus, his expression unreadable. "Take Astrid upstairs," he said. "You can't fight him," Thea said. "He owns the security force. He'll kill you." "I've fought worse," Kevin replied, loading a weapon, "and I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not." Thea stepped closer, her heart pounding. "Who are you, then?" He met her eyes. "I'm the man who makes monsters remember why they should be afraid?" He kissed her once, brief, certain, then turned back to his weapons. Astrid appeared at the door, tears in her eyes. "You better come back," she said. "Who else is going to help me with math?" Kevin smiled faintly. "I'll be back, kid, promise." Then he was gone, and Thea understood what was coming. This wouldn't be a fight. It would be an execution. The air was still when Victor Draven returned to Murphy's last drop. 3 hours had passed since his lieutenant's visit, and Draven arrived certain that intimidation had done its job. He brought 10 bodyguards with him, armed, armored, confident. The bar looked quiet from the outside, its lights dim, its doors unlocked. Inside, Kevin was waiting. The glass he'd been polishing all night gleamed like crystal in his hand. He didn't move when Draven entered. He didn't even look up. "Murphy," Draven said, stepping inside with that smug calm that only men who think they own everything can carry. "Heard you closed early. Bad for business." Kevin's voice was soft. "Sometimes a man needs to think." "About what?" Draven asked, strolling closer. His men spread out, taking their positions, weapons within reach. "About promises," Kevin said. "About peace." He looked up then, and for the first time Draven flinched. There was no warmth in the bartender's eyes, only the cold precision of a predator who had stopped pretending to be tame. "Speaking of peace," Draven said quickly, "I came to discuss your employees. Those Velvari girls, they're not for discussion." "Oh, but they are," Draven said, smirking as he took out a data pad. "Their father owed me debts. Gambling, mostly. These papers make them mine." Before Kevin could answer, a small voice came from the stairs. "You're the bad man." Everyone turned. Astrid stood there, small and shaking but fierce. "You're the one who hurt Mommy and Daddy," she said. "You laughed while they screamed." Draven's face went pale, his confidence cracking. "Children have such wild imaginations," he muttered. Astrid pointed at the gold ring on his hand, a dragon biting its own tail. "I remember that ring," she said. "You were there." The silence that followed was thick as smoke. Even Draven's bodyguards shifted uneasily. Kevin set down the glass very gently, as if it were the most delicate thing in the world. "Victor," he said. His voice was low, calm, deadly. "You've been coming to my bar for 3 years. Did you ever wonder why even you followed the rules here?" Draven tried to smirk. "Because I let you." "No," Kevin said, stepping out from behind the counter. "Because you were smart enough to be afraid. You just didn't know why." The lead bodyguard, a scarred veteran, stared at Kevin and went pale. "Boss," he whispered to Draven, "we should go." "What?" "That's the shepherd." The name hit the room like a shockwave. The Crimson Throne's ghost. The man who built an empire, then vanished. Draven tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "The shepherd's dead." Kevin smiled, slow, cold. "Disappeared," he corrected. "Big difference." The first bodyguard dropped his weapon and ran. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, only 3 stayed, too stupid or too loyal to flee. Draven's voice shook. "Your rule, no fighting in the bar." Kevin rolled his shoulders. "My rule," he said. "And I just changed it." The first guard reached for his weapon. Kevin moved faster. The bottle in his hand shattered against the man's head, dropping him instantly. The second lunged. Kevin twisted his wrist until it snapped, then slammed an elbow into his throat. The third tried to run. Kevin let him. That left Draven crawling backward. The predator turned prey. "Please," he gasped. "We can make a deal." Kevin grabbed him by the collar and lifted him like a rag doll. "You broke every code we ever lived by," he said. "You killed families. You hurt children. You think men like you get deals?" Draven tried to speak, but Kevin threw him across the room, his body crashing through a table. "Death would be easy," Kevin said. "You're going to live with what you've done." He tossed a data pad onto Draven's chest. "Your empire's gone. Your credits seized. Your allies already have proof you plan to betray them. You'll wake up tomorrow hunted by everyone you ever bought." Then he dragged Draven to the door, opened it, and threw him into the alley. "Run," he said. Draven crawled away, broken and terrified. Kevin stood in the doorway for a long moment, blood on his hands, silence in the air. When he finally turned, Thea and Astrid were on the stairs watching him. Thea's eyes were wet. Astrid ran to him, threw her small arms around his waist and whispered, "You scared me." Kevin knelt down, his voice soft again. "Takes more than that to kill me, kid," Astrid frowned. "That was really violent." "Yeah," he said quietly. "Sorry you had to see it." "It was also kind of cool," she admitted. Kevin chuckled, and the tension in the room eased. Thea walked closer, her voice trembling. "What happens now?" He looked at her, then at the bar, the shattered tables, the blood, the piece he'd just shattered to protect them. "Now," he said, "now we clean up." The next morning, Grimhold Station was quieter than usual. The rumors had already begun to spread. They said Victor Draven's empire had fallen overnight. They said the shepherd had returned. And they said that Murphy's last drop, once just a neutral bar, had become sacred ground again, protected by something far more dangerous than law. Kevin was behind the counter, as always, polishing that same glass. Thea stood nearby, serving drinks to the regulars, her movements steady now, confident. Astrid sat on her usual stool, swinging her legs, scribbling on a data pad. The bar was full, but peaceful. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody drew a weapon. Everyone knew what had happened here. Everyone knew what would happen if they forgot. Draven's name was being dragged through the official channels now. Thea had heard it on the news feeds that morning. Charges of murder, corruption, trafficking. Every secret Kevin had promised to expose was out in the open. Draven wasn't dead, but he might have wished he was. Thea glanced at Kevin as he cleaned the counter. His knuckles were bandaged, his expression unreadable. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. He didn't look up. "Regret what?" "Breaking your rule." Kevin paused for a moment, then set the glass down. "No," he said. "Peace isn't the absence of violence. It's protecting people so they can live without fear. Sometimes that means fighting." Astrid looked up from her pad. "So fighting is okay now?" Kevin gave her a look. "Only if someone deserves it," Astrid grinned. "That's vague." "That's life," he said, smirking. Weeks passed, and Murphy's last drop changed. The bar was cleaner, busier, brighter in small ways. The scarred assassins smiled more. The senator stopped trying to bribe people while drinking. Even the worst criminals on the station treated Kevin's place with something like respect. There was laughter again. Real laughter, not the cruel kind. Astrid started selling cookies to the customers, calling them peace offerings. They were terrible, burnt and crunchy, but nobody dared to say so. They bought every batch. Thea handled the finances, reorganizing the bar's books with quiet efficiency. She had found her strength again, her place. And Kevin? He found something he hadn't expected: family. Every night, when the bar was closed, the three of them would sit together upstairs. Thea would drink tea, Astrid would chatter about her business empire, and Kevin would just listen. The bar had given him peace once. Now, these two gave him purpose. Months later, when the Galactic News Network finally announced that Victor Draven had been sentenced to life in an off-world prison, Thea turned off the screen. "It's over," she said. Kevin smiled faintly. "It was over the moment he broke the rule." Astrid yawned. "Does that mean bedtime?" "Still 9 o'clock, Kevin said. "That's tyranny," she grumbled. "Maybe," he said, tucking her in. "But it's peaceful tyranny." Thea watched him for a long moment as he turned off the lights. The bar downstairs was quiet, the city outside still dangerous, but within these walls there was warmth. For the first time in years, she felt safe enough to whisper, "Thank you." Kevin didn't answer, But the corner of his mouth lifted as he reached for that same glass and began polishing again. Because in Murphy's last drop, some things never changed. The glass. The rule, and the peace one man fought to protect. 10 years passed, and Murphy's last drop was no longer just a bar. It was an empire of its own. The lights burned brighter, the walls shone cleaner, and the laughter that filled the place came from people who knew they were safe. The name Murphy meant protection now, not fear. Behind the bar stood Astrid, older, taller, silver hair tied back, and confidence sharp as a blade. She had Kevin's calm and Thea's mind, and the same unshakable rule still held: no fighting in the bar. When the first Gathion's head hit the counter that morning, she didn't even flinch. "Ladies, gentlemen, and all other life forms," she said, voice steady as steel. 2 minutes outside. "Drinks are on the house when you come back." Everyone obeyed. They knew better than to argue with a Murphy. The fight ended before it truly began. Astrid dragged the unconscious bodies outside, dusted her hands off, and went back to polishing a glass. Murphy's had grown. 3 full floors on Grimhold Station with satellite bars across a dozen worlds. Astrid ran it all. 43 ex-assassins worked security, 16 retired pirates handled logistics, and 1 nervous accountant managed the books. Peace had become profitable. Kevin and Thea's children filled the upstairs quarters with life. 5 of them now: Mira, Alex, David, Luna, and little Violet. Each one with a hint of their parents' fire. Sometimes the bar felt more like a home than a business, and that was exactly how Astrid wanted it. Mira ran in that morning, eyes wide. "Aunt Astrid, did you beat up more bad guys?" "Just a few," Astrid said, hiding a smile. "You can watch when you're older." "That's what you always say," the girl huffed. Hands on her hips. "That's because you're always too young," Astrid replied, patting her head. The day moved fast. Thea came downstairs later, her purple skin glowing softly under the lights. Kevin right behind her, older now but still built like a wall. His beard had silver streaks, his eyes tired but proud. "You're supposed to be resting," Thea said. "I'm supervising," Kevin replied, taking a seat. "Big difference," Astrid smirked. "You're just here for the whiskey," he grinned. Maybe. That piece didn't last long. The door opened and a young man walked in. Slick suit, too much confidence, a familiar gold ring on his hand. "Draven's nephew." "Miss Murphy," he said, smiling like a man who didn't know he'd already lost. "We need to discuss territory." "No," Astrid said simply, still polishing her glass. "I have 50 men outside. I have 16 snipers and 1 sister who likes testing new poisons," she said without looking up. "Still want to talk?" He hesitated, then sneered. "Your rules don't scare me." Astrid moved faster than he could blink. One swift motion, and his nose met her knee with a crack. He hit the floor, groaning. "My bar," she said evenly. "My rules." His men scattered before she could even finish. From the doorway, Kevin laughed, a deep, proud sound. "I used to worry about leaving you in charge," he said. "Used to?" Astrid asked, dragging Draven's nephew outside. "Now I just worry about what happens when you decide this station's too small." "Who says I haven't already?" She shot back, grinning. Thea appeared beside him, arms folded, but her smile was soft. "Family dinner, non-negotiable, and stop breaking noses in front of the children." "Mira wasn't watching," Astrid said. "She was recording," Thea replied. "Through the window." Kevin chuckled, shaking his head. "Enterprising kid." "Gets it from you," Thea teased, then kissed his cheek. 15 minutes later, the bar lights dimmed for the night. Upstairs, the family gathered around the table. Kevin, Thea, their children, and Astrid. Laughter echoed through the walls that had once held fear. Downstairs, the empty bar waited. The counter gleamed, the bottles lined up perfectly, and 1 glass sat under the light, spotless. Kevin picked it up, ran the cloth over it once, and smiled. "Some things change," he murmured. "Some things stay the same, because in Murphy's last drop, peace still had a price, rules still mattered, and family no matter how it was built, was still worth fighting for. Far away from Grimhold Station, in a place untouched by its smoke and neon lights, a new story was beginning. At the Galactic Enforcement Headquarters, a young man sat straight-backed in a spotless white room. His name was James Crawford, 18 years old, the youngest detective in agency history. His record was perfect, his uniform pressed, and his eyes full of the kind of determination only idealists have before the world teaches them better. Across the table, Director Harlan slid a datapad toward him. "First assignment," he said. "Consider it a test." James opened the file and the color drained from his face. On the screen was a photo of a young woman with silver hair and violet eyes, standing in a blood-soaked bar surrounded by unconscious bodies. The caption read, "Astrid Murphy, also known as the New Shepherd. She's only 18, Harlan continued. Runs about 40% of the organized crime in her sector. Efficient, smart, untouchable. We've lost 12 agents trying to get close to her." James looked up. "You want me to infiltrate her organization?" Harlan nodded. "You're her age. You'll blend in. She recruits young. Maybe she'll trust you. Bring her down from the inside. What happened to the others?" James asked quietly. "They disappeared," the director said. "Probably dead. Maybe not. That's what we're sending you to find out." That night, James couldn't sleep. He read everything the file contained: surveillance photos, transaction logs, rumor reports. There were pictures of Astrid laughing with her family, Kevin Murphy, Thea, and their children. None of them looked like criminals. They looked normal, happy even, but the facts didn't lie. Astrid Murphy controlled smuggling routes, peace treaties, and black market networks across half the galaxy. She was ruthless, brilliant, and efficient. The galaxy called her the New Shepherd. James stared at her image one last time before shutting the datapad. His grandfather had fought monsters in the old wars, real monsters. Maybe this girl was just another kind, the kind that smiled while ruling the underworld. He looked out at the stars beyond the station's window. Somewhere out there, Murphy's last drop still stood, glowing like a small promise in the dark. He didn't know yet that he was walking straight into it, into her story, into the same rule that had outlived empires. No fighting in the bar, and soon he would learn what that really meant. Weeks later, James Crawford's transport ship docked on Grimhold Station. The smell hit first: oil, ozone, and too many people packed into too little space. He kept his head down as he followed the crowd through security, the forged ID chip in his wrist pulsing steady against his skin. New identity: Jason Cross. Occupation: freelance bouncer. The station's corridors were exactly as the reports described: crowded, noisy, and dangerous. Everyone looked like they were running from something. But up ahead, a sign glowed through the steam and shadows: Murphy's last drop. From the outside, it didn't look like much. Just another bar wedged between repair shops and gambling dens. But James could feel it, something different in the air. A stillness. The same kind of silence soldiers used to whisper about before a battle. He stepped inside. The noise hit him first. Laughter, clinking glasses, music that hummed low through the floor. A dozen species shared drinks without tension. No one raised their voice. Even the criminals acted polite. Behind the counter stood Astrid Murphy. She was smaller than he expected, still young, her silver hair catching the bar's soft light. But her eyes, those sharp violet eyes, were older than the rest of her. The moment she saw him, she paused mid-conversation, studying him like she was reading his thoughts. "You knew?" she asked. "Yes," James said. "Name's Jason. Heard you were hiring muscle." She tilted her head, amused. "Everyone hears that. Half of them don't survive the interview. I'm a fast learner." Her smile was quick and cold. "We'll see. No fighting in the bar. You break that rule, you don't get a second chance." "I don't start fights," he said. "I end them." Good answer. She turned to a scarred alien polishing a glass. "Give him a shift, Tommy. Let's see if he lasts a night." As James took his place near the entrance, he caught a glimpse of the older man behind her, the original shepherd, Kevin Murphy. Time had aged him but not softened him. He was sitting with Thea, watching Astrid with quiet pride. James swallowed hard. The room felt heavier now, full of legends. He was standing in the center of everything he'd been warned about. Hours passed, and the crowd thinned. Astrid walked past him, checking tables, giving orders with the kind of ease that came from years of control. When she reached the door, she stopped beside him. "You're good," she said. "Too good for a station drifter." He forced a smile. "Maybe I got lucky," she raised an eyebrow. "Nobody gets lucky on Grimhold. You'll tell me your real story one day." And then she was gone, back to her world of rules, loyalty, and danger. James exhaled, his pulse racing. The mission had begun. But as he looked around the bar, at the people laughing and the peace that shouldn't exist in a place like this, a strange thought crossed his mind. Maybe Astrid Murphy wasn't the villain the reports described. Maybe, just maybe, she was the only reason this part of the galaxy hadn't torn itself apart. Still, orders were orders. His job was clear: get close, earn her trust, and then when the time came, bring her down. James stayed. Nights became weeks, and each shift taught him the little rules that kept the peace: who to smile at, who to avoid, what jokes to never repeat. Astrid watched him close, like a captain testing a new crewman. She threw him small tasks at first. Watch the door, keep an eye on a table, clear a spill, and graded him by how he moved, how he held himself. He learned to move like someone who belonged, not like someone pretending. Work let him watch the family from the edges. He saw Kevin's quiet habits, the way he polished the same glass until the world seemed to slow, and Thea's steady way of counting credits and people with equal care. He watched the kids run through the bar, shrieking and laughing, and a small part of him, the part not yet trained to obey orders, ached to belong. Astrid caught him once, watching them, and simply said, "You miss home?" He lied. Not yet. The deeper he got, the more the mission gave him small choices. An anonymous tip to the agency could end a shipment. A late-night ledger found in a back office might prove connections. He passed some items along, slow and careful, like a man slipping pebbles into a river to test the current. Each time he did, the agency praised him in private messages. Each time he did, he also watched what the leaks did to the people around him. A busted shipment meant a family of smugglers lost wages. Frozen funds meant a cook couldn't buy protein that week. The orders were clean on paper and messy in life. Astrid tested him in other ways. She set him to handle a drunk who liked to pick fights. James moved in the old ways he'd been taught: calm words, firm hands, a measured step that ended the trouble without breaking a neck. Astrid watched and then nodded once, approving. "You'd make a fine enforcer," she told him. He felt the agency's goal like a weight behind his teeth. He wanted to be proud of that praise, but he also wanted Astrid's nod to mean something kinder. One night, alone by the back door, he found Kevin washing the floor where glass had shattered months ago. The old man didn't look up when James came near. "You look tired," Kevin said without turning. "You look like someone trying to hold two different lives at once." James swallowed. "Do you regret what you did?" he asked, surprising himself. Kevin held the mop like a walking stick, then leaned on it and smiled a small, tired smile. "Regret is a luxury. I do what I must. Sometimes that's brutal. Sometimes it's clean." James answered nothing. The truth was a hard thing to hold. The file in his hand, the pad director Harland had given him weeks ago, painted Astrid as a crime boss. The life inside the bar showed her as a protector, a woman who stole from cruel men to feed children and replaced fear with rules. Both could be true. Both could be lies. He began to wonder which version the agency wanted to believe and whether that version fit reality. Orders came from Harland again. Push deeper, get proof, make it undeniable. A sting was planned. A fake contract, an undercover buyer, a trap to catch laundering in action. James's role was simple and clear. Be the inside man, let them think he was loyal, then lift a door and let the agency walk in. He agreed. He had to. He told himself he had to finish the job. Justice would come, and with it a clean ending to messy lives. The night of the sting, the bar smelled like roasted spice and hot metal. People laughed in the booths, oblivious to the net being drawn. James stood near Astrid. She gave him a look that held equal parts trust and mockery, and it cracked something in him. When the buyer arrived, slick and smiling and carrying credits, James felt the old training kick in, but also a new, quieter panic. As he moved into position, he realized the truth had teeth. Bringing Astrid down would be taking down a family, a shelter, a small island of order in a sea of cruelty. He held that thought like a burning coal. The plan was clear: follow orders. The feeling in his gut wasn't. Somewhere between his uniform and his heart, a choice was forming. He could finish the mission and go home a hero, or he could step back and look at what justice really meant for the people who trusted him. The bar hummed around him, full of life and danger. He breathed in, squared his shoulders, and walked forward, toward the place where truth and duty would finally collide. The night of the sting unfolded like a slow trap. The fake buyer arrived, smooth and polite, carrying a credit chip that hummed with false authority. James played his part perfectly, leading the man through the bar, showing him a back room where contracts were signed and money changed hands. Astrid watched from the doorway, her eyes sharp, reading every face in the room. For a moment, James almost believed he could keep both worlds, his badge and the life inside Murphy's. When he lifted the ledger, his hand shook. He thought of the children upstairs, of Kevin's quiet way of loving them, of Astrid's small but steady rule. He thought of the agency's clean words about justice. He thought of the men who would lose coins and pride if the raid went through. He thought of families who would go hungry if shipments were stopped. The choice felt heavier than any uniform. The signal came from his comm, soft, coded, final. James opened his mouth to give the signal and then closed it. He pressed the ledger back into the crate and met Astrid's eyes. For a second, the world narrowed to the two of them. She tilted her head as if asking a question without speaking. He could hear the agency in his ear. He could feel the ledger under his fingers. He made a decision. He moved away from the crate and walked to the front of the bar. "Sir," he said loudly to the buyer, "you're a little early." The buyer blinked, confused. James kept talking, voice steady and loud enough for a few heads to turn. "We don't do business like that here." The buyer's smile hardened. He reached for his chip. James didn't move fast. He moved right. He stepped between the buyer and the door, blocking the shot before anyone outside could react. Outside, boots hit the metal ramp. The agency arrived. Radios barked. Harsh voices ordered people to stand down. James felt a hand at his shoulder, cold, professional, and he realized he had betrayed someone. He had betrayed the bar. He had betrayed Astrid's trust. When the agents pushed through the door, people scattered the way they always did when the rules changed. Some left quietly, others ran. Astrid stepped forward. Her face did not scream or plead. It went very still like steel. "Jason Cross," Director Harlan called, walking in tall and sure. "You're under arrest for aiding and abetting organized crime." James stared at the man he'd obeyed for weeks. Inside, his chest felt hollow and tight. He had done what he had been trained to do. He had followed orders. He had also broken the trust of the people who had trusted him most. Astrid stepped close to him, close enough that he could see the small lines at the corners of her eyes, the hint of wear beneath her strong look. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why would you do this?" James could not find a clean answer. "Because I was told to," he said, which was true, and also not the whole truth. He had been told that saving the galaxy sometimes meant hurting the small parts that made it live. He had been told that big victories required small sacrifices. The words did not help. Director Harlan smiled thinly and gestured for the agents to secure the buyer and the records. "Good work, Mr. Cross," he said. "This is exactly the evidence we needed." Then something unexpected happened. The regulars in the bar, men and women who had been protected by Astrid's rule for years, stood up. Tommy, scarred and toothless, stepped forward. The Scar assassin, the Gorak bounty hunter, even the Zalbian at table 3, all of them moved closer to Astrid. They formed a quiet line between the agents and the bar. No weapons, no shouting. Just bodies and the same steady rule. Nobody hurts the family. Harlan's smile faltered. He did not expect public loyalty inside a hive of crime. "You have the right to disperse," he said, trying to keep his voice firm. "Move away and let us do our job." One by one, the regulars turned away. The agents moved in to seize the ledger and the buyer. Harlan signaled his team. They cuffed the buyer. They took the fake credits. They scanned records. James watched as the bright legal net closed around the paper trail. He felt neither triumph nor relief. He felt only a deep, empty ache where decisions lived. Later, when the cameras and the agents had gone and the bar's regulars drifted back in, Astrid stood on a crate and addressed the room. Her voice was steady but quiet. "You all know the rules," she said. "No fighting in the bar. Family protects family. If the agency wants to come in, they can. They can take papers and men. But they cannot take the thing this place is built on, our promise to one another." There was applause then, soft and real, not the cruel kind. James sat on a crate at the back and watched. Harlan's team left with the buyer and a folder of printed records. Outside, a small ship waited with lights on. James's comm buzzed with new orders. He had broken one trust and kept another. He had followed orders and bent them into a corner. He had no clean conscience. Astrid came down from the crate and walked toward him. For a moment, he braced for rage or pain, but she only looked at him with tired, honest eyes. "You did what you thought was right," she said. "You hurt us because you thought it would help us in the long run." He swallowed. "I thought I was saving people, and you almost destroyed the people who need saving most," she said. "That's the trouble with big ideas." James closed his eyes. He had no answers that fixed everything. He had choices to make now, small, real, human choices that would decide who he was. Astrid reached out and touched his hand. For the shortest second, a hesitant, fragile thing. "You can help clean up the mess you made," she said. "Or you can leave." He looked at Kevin across the room, older, quieter, tired, and then at the children's footprints in the dust. He thought of the ledger in his hand, the agency's neat justice, and the hungry families who might lose food if trade routes were cut. There was no perfect path. "I'll help," he said finally. "I'll help fix what I broke," Astrid nodded. "You're not off the hook," she said. "But we'll see if you mean it." Outside, as the stars blinked and the station moved on, James felt like a man who had been reborn into a life that would not let him be clean. He had crossed a line and come back, not because he was forgiven, but because someone had decided to test him. It would be a long road. The ledger had been partly seized. The agency had proof. Harlan would not forget easily. But inside Murphy's last drop, the rules still mattered, and family still protected family. In the weeks that followed, James worked like a man with a debt to unpaid. He cleaned, he carried, he ran errands that no one wanted. He pulled shifts, learned the names of the kids, and learned to read Astrid's small shifts of mood. He passed information to the agency in small, careful doses, only what would not ruin innocent people's lives. He also warned the bar when rival crews sniffed trouble. He was useful in new, messy ways that the file on his desk had never imagined. Harlan was not pleased. The agency wanted a clean win. They wanted prison sentences and headlines. Instead, they got a fragile truce, a few arrests, and a bar that kept functioning. It was messy, and it was human. Months later, an official report quietly closed some accounts and left others alone. Draven's nephew tried to fight back and failed. Some men were jailed and some routes redirected. Families kept food. The ledger that mattered was split, part in agency archives, part still in the bar's hidden closet, the proof of a system bent to survive. One clear night, James stood on the bar's back steps and watched the station lights. Astrid joined him, carrying a cup of tea. "You kept your promise," she said softly. "I kept part of it," he answered. "I couldn't do everything their way." "Good," she said, smiling a little. "This place needs people who choose the hard path." He looked up at her then, at the woman who had become something the reports never captured. "Do you regret it?" he asked. Astrid thought for a long moment. "Sometimes," she said finally. Mostly I don't. Rules matter, but they are tools, not gods. You learned that. He did. He learned that law without heart broke things that mattered. He learned that mercy carried consequences. He learned that families, found families, were messy and fierce and worth more than neat wins on a report. Back inside, Kevin polished the same glass as he always had. The bar hummed with life. The rule held, no fighting, family first. The ledger had changed hands, pieces hidden and pieces exposed, and the balance would be tested again. But for now, Murphy's last drop kept its small, dangerous peace. And somewhere in a quiet office far from the station, Director Harland wrote a note on the top of James's file, "Not finished." Monitor closely.